there's nothing in this world that could ever satisfy. And through every trial, my soul will sing, no turning back. Been set free. Christ is enough for me. Christ is enough for me. And everything I need is in you. And everything I need. Christ, my all in all, my joy and my salvation. In this hope will never fail, 'cause heaven is our home. And through every storm, my soul will sing, Jesus is here. To God be the glory. Christ is enough for me. Yeah, Christ is enough for me. And everything I need is in you. Everything I need. Oh, you're everything. I have decided to follow Jesus. No turning back. No turning back. I have decided to follow Jesus. No turning back. No turning back. The cross before me, the world behind me. No turning back. No turning back. The cross before me, the world behind me. No turning back. No turning back. 'Cause Christ is enough for me. Christ is enough for me. Everything I need is in you. And everything I need, sing it again. Christ is enough for me. Christ is enough for me. Everything I need is in you. Everything I need. And when peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my Lord thou hast taught me to say, it is well, it is well. with my soul. It is well, it is well with my soul. My sin, oh, the bliss of this glorious thought. My sin, not in part, but in whole, is nailed to the cross, and I bear it no more. Praise the Lord, praise the Lord, oh my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well, it is well with my soul. And Lord, haste the day when my faith shall be my side. The cloud be rolled back as a scroll. The drum shall resound, and the Lord shall descend. Even so, it is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well, it is well with my soul. Sing it again. It is well, it is well with my soul. It is well, it is well with my soul. 'Cause it is well, it is well with my soul.
Oh, how high would I climb mountains if the mountains were where you hide? And oh, how far I'd scale the valleys if you graced the other side. And oh, how long have I chased rivers from lowly seas to where they rise, against the rush of grace descending from the source of its supply. 'Cause in the highlands and the heartache, you're neither more or less inclined. I would search and stop at nothing. You're just not that hard to find. I will praise you on the mountains. I will praise you in the mountains in my way. You're the summit where my feet are. So I will praise you in the valleys all the same. No less God within the shadows. No less faithful when the night leaves me astray. You're the heaven where my heart is. In the highlands and the heartache all the same. Oh, how far beneath your glory does your kindness extend the path from where your feet rest on the sunrise to where you sweep the sinner's past. Oh, how fast would you come running if just to shadow me through the night? Trace my step through all my failure and walk me out the other side. For who could dare ascend the mountain, that valleyed hill called Calvary, before the one I call Good Shepherd, who like a lamb was slain for me? I will praise you on the mountain. I will praise you in the mountains in my way. You're the summit where my feet are. So I will praise you in the valley all the same. No less God within the shadows. No less faithful when the night leads me astray. You're the heaven where my heart is. In the highlands and the heartache all the same. Whatever I walk through, wherever I am, your name can move mountains. Wherever I stand, and if ever I walk through the valley of death, I'll think through the shadows. My song of ascent, my song of ascent. My song of ascent. But from the gravest of all valleys come the pastures we call grace, a mighty river flowing upwards from a deep but empty grave.
Hey, welcome to the service today. My name is Wes. I'm one of the pastors here at Southridge. If you're looking for more information about our church, what's going on in the church, what's coming up, just go to our website at southridgefellowship.ca. There you'll find all sorts of information, ways to give, and including if you're new and we don't know who you are, we want to get to know who you are. So fill out a connect form. It should be right there on the website. Just fill that out. It starts that correspondence. We get to know you, you get to know us, and it's just a part of being part of the family here. So please fill that out if you're new, or if you think maybe we don't know you. It'd be a great thing to start with, and just start that process and being part of our church family. Couple announcements we want to make sure you're aware of. The first is that we have a baptism coming up at Crescent Beach, a beach baptism. Like in the past, if you've known us for a while, sometimes we do these things, especially pre-pandemic, but we're doing a baptism at Crescent Beach swimming area, September 5th at 7:30 p.m. So we want to see you there to support. There's not a restriction on outdoor gatherings, so just come and be part of that. We would love to celebrate with these individuals. Right now, there's 6 people signed up. There's a couple people that are still thinking about it. Maybe there's gonna be more, maybe you're interested in that. If you're interested in baptism, just let me know, wes@southridgefellowship.com right away so that we can get that process going. But at the very least, come and support these people. 2 of them are my kids. At least 2 of them are my kids. One of mine's still thinking about it. So it's gonna be a lot of fun. So I hope to see you there. We've got some young adults and some youth that are gonna be there. It's gonna be awesome. So September 5th, 7:30 p.m., Crescent Beach swimming area. The other thing is that we've got the corn roast coming up. It is going to be awesome. Food, fun, games, all outside. Service at 10 o'clock. And then we're going to have some food and games afterwards. So make sure you're there. Carve it out of your schedule. It is going to be awesome. It's back to almost feeling like we're back to normal again. And with all these things coming back, restrictions and things, it'll be so good to have everybody there. So it's an outdoor thing. Come September 12th. It's gonna be awesome. Now we're gonna transition into the message today, and just as we go into this message, just remove all distractions, be prepared, and even just shoot up a quick prayer to say, God, like, what do you want me to learn and to be challenged by today? How can I be transformed? And just to pray that. And as we go into the message, just grab a Bible, get ready, and listen to what God has to say to you today.
Have you ever been in a situation when you suddenly realize that you weren't asking the right questions? Pam and I do a lot of premarital counseling, and one of the things we've realized is oftentimes couples that come to us, they're excited, they're, in love, they're gushing, everything is rosy, they're looking forward to the wedding and spending their life together. And we realize that they aren't actually asking the questions they should be asking. We talk about it as the couple having their love goggles on, because we realize that they don't actually understand what it will take to actually have a successful marriage. They think that their love will take them through everything. And so part of our role, Pam and I do, is try and help them ask the questions they should be asking, like, are they good at communicating with each other? Do they know how to resolve conflict? Do they have the same understanding of money or the same value of money? Do they know what their short-term and long-term goals are? Do they know how they're going to decide how to spend holidays with both sides of the family? Do they even like the same type of vacation? Like all those questions, if they have good communication skills and good conflict resolution skills, they can work their way through all those things. But there are some questions when you're getting married that if you don't talk about them, they can have some serious ramifications for your marriage. Like one of the questions would be do you have past trauma in your life that you've never dealt with? Are you addicted to pornography? Do you struggle with mental health issues? These are all things that have potential to really hinder or harm a relationship? Or maybe like this one, is your mother like that creepy mom in the I Will Love You Forever Robert Munch book? You know that book that's really a horror story that's disguised as a children's story? Like there are asking the right questions help make you prepared for life. And when it comes to spiritual things, spiritual questions, the Bible tells us that oftentimes we don't ask the right questions. We're not even thinking of the right questions that we should be asking. And so I want to look at one of those questions today, and it's found in Psalm 15. And Psalm 15 basically asks this question: who gets to be with God? Let me read the first verse of Psalm 15. And it says this: Lord, who may dwell in your sacred tent? Who may live on your holy mountain? What's David getting at here? What he's saying is the sacred tent is a word that describes the tabernacle, and then later it would imply the temple. And so who gets to be with you, God? And the holy mountain could either be like Mount Sinai, where the Israelites received the Ten Commandments from God. It's where God dwelt, or Mount Zion, where they believed, where the temple was actually built. Where would God be, and who gets to spend time? Who gets to live with you? A modern question in our day would be like, who gets to go to heaven? Who gets to live with you, God? Who is that person? And so in verse 2, God actually answers David, and he says this: the one whose walk is blameless, who does what is righteous, who speaks the truth from their heart. What is David saying here? This is how I rephrase it. There's three things that I think God is telling us, identifies or tells us who actually is the type of person who is going to get to live with God. It's the person who lives their life with integrity. It's the person who does the right thing. It's the person who speaks truth. Now, we can read this verse 2, with our New Testament glasses on. And if you read it with your New Testament glasses on, you might not get exactly what David is trying to communicate with us. Because when we read the one whose walk is blameless, when we read it from a New Testament perspective, what we think that is saying, when we think the word blameless, what we understand that to mean is more of has a legal sense to it. You know, like the person who is perfect, the one who is without sin. It's how God looks at us from a legal perspective. But that's not actually the Old Testament meaning of the word in this context. It has more to do with this idea of completeness, this idea of wholeness, meaning that the person whose walk is blameless is that type of person who does and lives out what they believe, whose actions actually match what they say they're going to do, whose life is congruent, where there's integrity in their life, where everything you see about the person is what you see. There's nothing hidden. They're not hiding anything. It's living their life with integrity. The other thing I just want to point out in this verse has to do with the word truth. In the Hebrew text, there is no article. So it's not the truth. Because if you read this verse with your New Testament glasses on, you might think that what David is saying is that it's the person who speaks about the gospel from their heart. But David lived 1,000 years before Jesus. He doesn't know about the gospel. What he does know is that God reveals truth. And a better way of maybe saying is those who speak truth from their heart. And God is the God of truth, and God is the revealer of truth. And so you have this idea that the person who is going to be with God is the person who lives their life with integrity. It's the person who does the right thing, and it's the person who speaks truth. And so how do you actually live that out? Because those are pretty general things, right? Like he's not giving us like, what does that actually look like? And so you have to read verses 3-5 to get some specifics. What does living these three ways actually look like in life? And so David goes on and he shares this. Who is this person? It's the one whose tongue utters no slander, who does no wrong to a neighbor, and casts no slur on others, who despises a vile person but honors those who fear the Lord, who keeps an oath even when it hurts and does not change their mind, who lends money to the poor without interest, who does not accept a bribe against the innocent. Whoever does these things will never be shaken. You see, David lays out 7 very specific ways in terms of how we can live our life. And so let's look at them. How do we speak truth? What does David say about that? He actually gives us 2 things, 2 examples about what it means to speak truth. And the first one is negative. It's don't slander. And this is found in verse 3. He tells us not to slander. You see, when we slander someone, what are we doing? We are actually lying about them. We are lying about that person to someone else behind their backs. We are speaking against them. And he goes on in verse 3 at the end of it to also say, don't cast slurs. Now that is a very uncommon phrase for us. I'm not sure when was the last time you said, hey, you just cast a slur against that person, right? Never. But what does this mean? What is David saying here? You see, a slur is something different. A slur is actually something that is true, whereas slander is a lie, and you're trying to destroy someone with a lie. A slur means you're trying to destroy someone with the truth. It means that you are sharing something or saying something that will bring someone shame or disgrace. And you justify it because you say, well, it's true, and I'm told by David that I should speak truth. And yet what David is saying here, it's someone who does not slur others. Means that you watch what you say about others, even if it's true. What's the intent? Why are you saying it? You know, when little Johnny pees on the playground, why do you tell other people that little Johnny peed? Is it so that they can avoid the puddle? Or is it so you can embarrass little Johnny? There's 2 very different motivations for sharing why Johnny peed on the playground, right? Why do you tell someone that their marriage is falling apart? Why do you tell someone that their kid is in addiction and drugs? What is the motivation? It might be true, but why are you sharing it? You see, we often slander someone or we cast slurs on someone because we want others to judge the person as we have judged them. We want others to see that person as we see them. And yet Jesus tells us in Matthew chapter 7, verse 1, that we're not to judge others. And that is part of the rationale why, like David says, speak truth. So don't lie and slander, but also when you're speaking truth, make sure you understand why you're doing it. Are you doing it to tear this other person down? If you are, don't do it. And then he goes on to tell us 4 things about how to do the right thing. How do we do the right thing? The first one is found in verse 3 again. It's do right to your neighbors. Well, David says it in the negative. He says, those do no wrong to their neighbors. I like it in the positive. So those who do the right thing, do right to their neighbors. Now, it's easy to do right to a neighbor who's a good neighbor, right? It's a little harder when that neighbor is not a good neighbor. So is David saying that we need to do right to a neighbor that is not a good neighbor? You mean, like, what if your neighbor is cheap and won't pay to help fix the fence? What if your neighbor lets her dog defecate on your front lawn? Do you pick it up and throw it on their lawn? What if your neighbor's kids throw rocks over the fence and breaks your solar lights? What if your neighbor just allows their trees and stuff to grow and it goes over into your yard? What if your neighbor sprays their fence, paints it, spraying it, and it gets stuff on your house and they won't clean it up? What if that happens? Now, of course, all of these scenarios are hypothetical, which I have never experienced, although they are oddly specific, right? What if your neighbor does all that stuff? You see, one of the relationships in your life that will test you is your relationship with your neighbor. And what does David say here? Don't wrong your neighbor. Do right for your neighbor. Jesus comes along and he He actually talks about this in Matthew chapter 5, but he uses the word enemy because if you've ever had a bad neighbor, you think about them as your enemy, don't you? Like if you have a nasty neighbor, they're your enemy. And what does Jesus say about an enemy? He says, love your enemies. So David says, do right by your neighbor. Jesus says, even if your neighbor is terrible, you need to love your neighbor. Do right by them. The second thing that David points out in terms of how do we do the right thing is found in verse 4, and it talks about keeping your promises even though it costs you. It says, keep your oath even when it hurts. Don't change your mind. So what is he saying here? I think there's a couple of examples that we can think through. I think the first one is like your wedding, right? Like that is one of the most serious oaths that you can take. Your wedding vows where you stand before the witnesses in front of your spouse and you commit to loving them for the rest of your life until you die, right? Like that is a serious vow and a serious oath. And it's probably a good thing that we actually don't know when we're young and we're getting married that how much that vow is actually going to cost us over the next 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years, right? Probably a good thing. But we survive on love and we jump into it. But what about if you own a business and you do a contract, a business deal, and you realize that after that quote has been accepted, that you misquoted, you missed something. And that for you to actually, complete what you have said you're going to complete, it's going to cost you more than what you're going to make. Do you walk away from it? Now, I don't think David's not saying, hey, try and renegotiate, but what if that person who you signed the contract said, no, you said you would do it for this price, now I expect you to do it. Do you walk away? When I was in the painting industry, if you got the bottom quote on a job, there was usually this little bit of fear that would go, okay, what did I miss that all the other guys caught? What did I miss? Why am I the lowest quote on this? And there was this one job I did. I call it the Tower from Hell. It was a big job, and everything that could go wrong went wrong on this job. So much so that a job that should have taken like 3 months to do ended up taking me almost a year and a half to finish. And one day at the end of the job, I sat down and calculated what this job actually cost me, and it was in the neighborhood of about $40,000. And there were so many times during that job that I just wanted to walk away. This is costing me too much. But I didn't. Ironically, this job, the Tower from Hell, is the job that God used to push me out of the painting industry and actually to become a pastor. So David is reminding us, keep your promises, even though it costs you, whether it's time or money. And now maybe for some of you, those seem to be very specific, like our wedding vows or a business deal or a contract that we sign, very legal, very formal. But I think there's some other things where we need to look at our own lives in terms of what this means for our life. Let me ask you this. When you say you will show up to something, do you? Or is it easy for you to commit to something and then back out? Like maybe it's a coffee with a friend or your spot on the volunteer schedule, a family function, or a shift at work. You see, if you're an employer, you know which employees don't keep their word, right? If you lead volunteers, you know which volunteers you can always count on. And when it comes to family, we know which members of our family are a little flaky, and we're never sure if they're actually going to come, even though they say they're going to come. And I think this is harder for those who suffer from FOMO, the fear of missing out. Because if you suffer from that, you struggle when you commit to something, and if something better comes along, you want to do the better thing. You want to be part of something that's more exciting than what you committed to. And you see, we break our word, we break our promise all the time, but we justify it, right? Oh, you know what? I'm just too tired. I won't do that. I need some rest. Or, you know what? That other person won't care if we don't get together. Or, you know what? This thing is actually better for me than the other thing that I said I would go to. Living right and doing the right thing means that once you make a commitment, when you say yes to something, you follow through and show up. Matthew 5:33, Jesus says it simply as this: your yes should be a yes and your no, a no. God calls us to be keepers of our promise. Do the right thing by keeping your commitments, even when it costs you something. You see, if keeping your word never costs you anything, then I can confidently say that you probably aren't really keeping your word as often as you think you are. Because sooner than later, in order to keep your word, in order to keep that commitment, you will have to make a choice that will cost you something. And whether it's time, money, sleep, or missing out on a better experience, David tells us, and Jesus reminds us, that it is in order to do the right thing, we have to keep our word, regardless of the cost. The third thing that David tells us and shares with us about how to do the right thing is to lend to those who are in need. And this is verse 5. And verse 5 tells us that you're to lend money to the poor without charging interests. This aspect of what David is sharing speaks to the value of generosity, the value of compassion. It's about having an open hand with our possessions and our money. Jesus in Matthew 5:42 tells us that we aren't to turn away someone who wants to borrow something from us. The Bible also talks about it this way, that if you lend something to someone, you should do it in such a way that you don't even expect it back. Like, that's how free you are to be. That's how open-handed you are and supposed to be with the possessions that you let others borrow. Which reminds me, James, I am going to return your pressure washer. I will. I promise. I really will. But thanks for letting me borrow it. David adds this other little element to this piece about lending to others, to not charge interest. In the Old Testament, there was this practice called usury, which meant that people would lend something and they'd pay interest. But the Jews were not supposed to lend money to fellow Jews and pay interest or charge interest. And basically the idea is that you're not supposed to get better yourself, make more money off the backs of poor people. And so doing the right thing means that you don't gain financially by lending and getting interest off people who need the money that you're lending it to. The last thing, the fourth thing of how do we do the right thing is also found in verse 5. And basically what David says is you need to protect the innocent. He says, the person who does the right thing is the person who does not accept a bribe against the innocent. What is David saying here? He's saying that don't use whatever position you have for an advantage. He's saying that if you have power, then you need to use that power to help the innocent, to help the person who needs you to step in on their behalf, not to hinder them. So, what is David saying here? How do you speak truth? You do it by not slandering. You do it by not casting a slur on someone. How do you do the right thing? You do it by being a good neighbor, by doing right by your neighbor, by keeping your promises even though it costs you something, by lending to those who have a need, by protecting the innocent. Which leaves us with one question then. How do you live your life with integrity? And David gives us one example of this, and it's found in verse 4. And he says this: it's the person who despises a vile person, but honors those who fear the Lord. What's he saying here? In the Old Testament, the word vile, you look it up, and if you do a search, you'll find that often it is used as an adjective to describe idols. And it gives us a pretty good understanding of God's view of idols, that they are vile. And I think what David is doing here, he's reminding us that it is a lot easier to live a life of integrity when we surround ourselves with friends and mentors who have the same beliefs and goals that we do. So if your friends are pursuing hard after Jesus, it is so much easier for you to pursue hard after Jesus. But if all you have is non-Christian friends, or if none of your family believes in Jesus, you're surrounded with people who have different values and even different goals for their life than you do as a follower of Jesus, which makes it hard. Matthew 6:22 and 23, Jesus talks about this. He talks about the influences in our life. And he uses this example that when we have healthy influences, meaning spiritually healthy influences, we will be filled with light. But if we are surrounded with unhealthy spiritual influences, we will be full of darkness. We really do need to pay attention to the influences in our life. Who are we spending time with? I think this is why so many teens and young adults, when they leave to go to university, walk away from Jesus. Because they've grown up surrounded by these great influences, their parents instilling great values and instilling truth in them, but then they get to university and they have no one who shares those beliefs around them. And slowly comes the day when the people who are around them, the vile people, the spiritually unhealthy people, influence them to walk away from Jesus. You see, we need to surround ourselves with people who pursue Jesus just like we want to pursue Jesus. It's so important. That's why our discipleship rhythm of community with a few is so important. I mean, for those of you who have been part of a good community group, understand this. You know what a lifeline it can be to be surrounded by others who share your love of Jesus, who spur you on, who lift you up when you are weak. It is so important. Throughout this message, I have been reinforcing the points that David makes with points that Jesus says from Matthews 5-7. Do you realize that that is Jesus' Sermon on the Mount? It's almost as if Jesus uses Psalm 15 as a blueprint for his Sermon on the Mount. So what is David and Jesus trying to tell us? You see, Psalm 15 is known as a temple entry psalm, meaning that the Jews would read or recite Psalm 15 before they went to the tabernacle or before they went to the temple. And it was to prepare themselves because it was a reminder of what God required of his people, of the type of person God wants. You see, loving God and following Jesus is not just a mental exercise. It's not just lip service. It's not just something we do on Sunday. Loving God and following Jesus means a radical way of living. So who gets to be with God? Because that's the question that David is asking us. Who gets to be with God? The person who gets to be with God is the person who is not shaken. At the end of verse 15, it says, whoever does these things, meaning whoever lives their life full of integrity, whoever does the right thing, whoever speaks truth, will never be shaken. Jesus ends his Sermon on the Mount with this illustration of two builders. There's one builder who builds a house on a rock. The other builder builds a house on sand. And when the storms of life come, when the storms shake and rattle and roll these two houses, the one on the sand is destroyed, but the one on the rock is not shaken. It stands firm. And so what is David saying here? What does Jesus want us to see in this passage? The person who will be with God is the person who builds their life on the rock, who is Jesus. They will never be shaken. But it goes beyond that. You see, Jesus is driving home the point here in the New Testament when he talks to his disciples. And he says this, if you love me, you will do something. You know what he says? If you love me, you will obey my commands. David reflects this in the psalm. If we love God, we will do and obey what he asks us and how he asks us to live our lives. You see, for us to obey and follow Jesus, a true follower of Jesus reveals themselves in the way they live their life. They live a life full of integrity. They do the right things, and they speak truth. Let me pray for us. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for today. We thank you for this Psalm 15, and we thank you for this question, who gets to live with you? Lord, my prayer is that everyone who's listened to this message knows who you are, knows your Son Jesus, and has committed to follow him with their whole life. Lord, if there's someone who hasn't, I pray that your Spirit would work on them, that you would point out to them that the only way that they can know you and live with you is through your Son Jesus. Lord, may they come to the place where they will turn their whole life over to Jesus and accept him. And by doing so, Lord, that they will learn to obey what Jesus asked them to obey. Lord, you ask us the same things you asked of David. You ask us to live a life of integrity, of completeness, of being who we are in terms of what we say and do what we say we will do. That we will do the right thing even though it is hard, even though it costs us. We will keep our promises. We will help the poor. We will protect the innocent. We will be the good neighbor. And Lord, we will speak the truth. So God, thank you for this psalm. Thank you for this reminder. In Jesus' name, amen.
Well, thanks for joining us in our service today. We're so happy that you're here. One of the things we do like to do online, especially, is to go a little bit deeper with 3 questions. So with these 3 questions, I'm going to read them, but it'd be great if you could turn to somebody, turn to someone beside you, phone somebody, just to go a little deeper and see maybe someone else that will also watch the message to say, what did you think about these things? So here's the 3 questions coming out of the message today, just to help us go a little deeper. The first is this: what do you find difficult about speaking truth? Okay. The second one is there an area of your life that God is currently asking you to do the right thing? And the third question is, what is God saying to you about the company you keep? Well, thanks for watching. We are so happy that you're with us. We look forward to seeing you again sometime soon. Have a great week.